Hello and welcome to day 3 of 7 days of Halloween. Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome back. Well, over the last 2 days I shared with you a couple of the new Stampers Anonymous sets that I picked up this year. And for this card I wanted to share with you an older Halloween set that's new to me, but certainly not new to his collection. I really love making retro cards, and I wanted to see if I could duplicate some of the retro cards that I've seen out on Pinterest. So these are the 4 images that I worked with, and I found some great retro images, and I created some principles. And then what I decided to do is see if I could duplicate them, because I mean, it's easy to print out images that you find on the internet, but it's a lot more fun to actually recreate the images that you see. So that's what I'm going to be doing for you today. So before I actually got into creating some of these retro cards using my stamps and my inks, I did want to create some cards just using some principles. So I found some really great retro images, and then I cleaned them up using some of my editing software. And I made a few of those, and they came out really great. So if you are interested, I do have some of those retro images over on my Etsy shop, and I will make sure I link to them. You can create your backgrounds, and then you can easily print and fussy cut some of those wonderful retro images to create your own retro cards. So like I said, Stampers Anonymous came out with a Tim Holtz stamp some time ago, and it's called Retro Halloween. And that's what I'm going to be using today to create some of my retro cards. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create some backgrounds. Now there's a lot of stencils out there that would create great retro backgrounds. The one that I'm going to use today is the Raise stencil from Tim Holtz, but I also wanted to share with you a couple of other stencils that I think would work great. Anything that has a retro look to it would make a wonderful background. So when I was playing, I did create some retro backgrounds using some of these stencils, and I also used a couple other colors that I thought would work great for Halloween. At the end of the video, I'll leave links and a list of the colors that I used, but certainly use your imagination, because any of the colors out there probably would look really great. I just really wanted to go for a retro look, and retro typically is a little bit more vibrant, and of course you got some of those neons in there. So the card that I wanted to create was that one that I showed you at the beginning of the video that had the cat in the middle, and then it had that ray background. Now the Raise stencil worked perfectly, but you have to kind of adjust it a little bit, because you want your rays to be symmetrical, and you want them to be even. So I found the middle part of my card on my cardstock, and then I made a little tick mark, and then that's what I used to for my start point. And then I took my Raise stencil and I found the ray that stood straight up. And that's why it looks like on camera that the stencil is a little wonky, because it is. I wanted my ray to be straight up, right in the middle. And then that's what I was going to use for my center point. Using the blue painter's tape is great when you're working with stencils, because it's not very sticky, but it's tacky enough. So if you do need to make any adjustments, you can easily pull it up and it's not going to rip your paper. But if you don't have any of this blue painter's tape, just find some washi tape that doesn't have really heavy adhesive. Some of those tissue tapes from Tim Holtz, some of the earlier editions, work great because they are the tissue tapes, they are translucent, and they're not very tacky, so they'll work really great to hold down some of your stencils and your paper. Now when you are adding your distress ink, you do want to be very generous. If you go too light, then your background is going to be very vibrant, and we're looking at retro cards here, so we want them to be really vibrant. And this orange marmalade is great for the background. And as you saw, I went ahead and I did the top portion of the card, and then I just flipped over the card and found my center ray, and then I did the bottom portion of the card. Now I did want to create a couple of cards for you. So the second card that I'm going to be creating is the background that had the stripes. And this background is really easy to create. So if you don't have that Raised stencil, you can still create these retro cards just by using some of your washi tape. Now, depending on the size of your stripes is going to be the size of washi tape that you take. They have some really thin washi tape out there that would look really fun, I think, as well. but I went with just a standard size, and it created 3 lines for me. So again, once you have your washi tape in place, you want to go ahead and take your blending tool and the color that you're going to be using to create your background, and you want to go ahead and generously add your distress ink. I'm sticking with the Spice Marmalade for this demonstration, but again, there's a lot of colors out there that you can use. That citrus green color is a really great color as well. It's really vibrant and it has that neon look, and it really creates a fun background. So when you're finished blending and you've got all of the ink that you want on your background, then all you need to do is simply pull up your washi tape. And for me, this is one of my favorite parts because I love the way that it looks when you pull up masks. Your background is still so vibrant and so white, and it really is great to see the final result. Now, I know that there are a lot of people out there that really like Halloween and making the Halloween cards, but they're not really into the bloody, creepy, vampire, zombie-like cards. So I wanted to make sure in my series I did create some cards that would work for all ages. These retro cards would be great for little kids because they're not too spooky, but they do have that Halloween theme. I have a girlfriend that likes making fall cards, and she does sometimes makes the Halloween cards as well. And Krista really likes the fun Halloween cards. She doesn't get into the bloody and the spooky ones. So I told her that I would create a fun card for her and dedicate it to her. So once you have your backgrounds completed, and if you're going to make several retro cards, what I would recommend is get all of your backgrounds completed first. And then once you have your backgrounds, you can start to work with your images. Now, again, the stamp set that I'm using is from Stampers Anonymous, and it's one of the older Tim Holtz collections. And I found it on a D-Stash group, and I got it for a really good price. But because it isn't one of the newer sets, I'm sure you can find it out there, and I'll make sure I link to it as well for you. The ink that I'm using is the black archival ink, and I'm using my Misty tool to stamp my images to get a real nice crisp image. All right, so now that I have my background and I have my images colored, it's time to adhere them to my card. I'm using some Distress Collage Medium, which is a product that I typically use for a lot of my collages, and it works great. Not only can you use it for the back side of your adhesive, but it also is really great to add to the top part as well because it does dry translucent. Now, when you are using this Distress Collage Medium, you really don't need a lot, but you want to make sure that you get all edges of your image so that way nothing gets stuck underneath and it doesn't pull up. And then you're ready to go ahead and mat it onto some black cardstock. All right, so if you remember on the card that I'm trying to duplicate, it had a Happy Halloween. Part of the wording was on top and part of the wording was on the bottom of the image. But it was at an arc, and I didn't actually have this sentiment, but I did have a couple of words saying Happy Halloween that I thought worked fine. So I simply used my Misty to line up exactly where I wanted them to go on my card. And then I stamped my sentiment, putting the happy on top over the image, and then the Halloween at the bottom. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that before you actually adhere your center image, your retro image, you want to make sure that you take into consideration your sentiment. And if you are trying to duplicate this card and you want to divide up your sentiment, you just want to make sure that you have enough room on the top and enough room on the bottom to make sure you get a clean area to stamp your sentiment. And then the final touch after the sentiment was, of course, the little star. Now, if you recall in the original retro card, it did have a star, and I didn't have a star in my stash, so I had to actually run to Michael's when I was designing this card, and I was fortunate to find a little star that worked perfectly. I wasn't really sure exactly what size I needed, so I did buy a couple of stars, but stars are great stamps to have in your stash anyway, and you can use them for all sorts of designs. And the little star that I had actually had little dots around it, so I was really happy with what I found, and it didn't cost me very much. So I hope you've enjoyed day 3 of my 7 Days of Halloween card. These cards so far probably have been my favorite. I really enjoyed making these retro cards, and it's especially fun when you find an old card image on the internet and you're able to duplicate it. So as always, I will leave a list of all the products that I've used to create the card along with the links to the stores. Don't forget, I do have some of these retro images in my Etsy shop, so I will link to those as well. So if you don't happen to have the stamp set, and you don't want to invest in it necessarily, you can certainly still make these cards by using my digital images. If you've enjoyed the video, I would sure appreciate a thumbs up. And don't forget to leave me a comment. As a reminder, I am going to be doing a drawing at the end of the series, and I'm going to be giving away one of the stamp sets that I use in this series, but I'm not going to tell you which one, so you have to leave a comment on every one of my videos. And of course, you need to be a subscriber to my channel. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you head out. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again tomorrow.